Hello, everyone. This is Sukanya Mandal. I'll be presenting you with the topic of demystifying MLOps with AWS. So first, we'll walk through the traditional software development process, and then how does it relate? How DevOps contribute to the traditional software development process, and then move on to a comparison of MLOps, the challenges that ML production pipeline forces, and then we'll talk about Kubeflow, then AWS components for Kubeflow, and then we'll walk through a small demo. Before I begin, a couple of announcements. So there's a Q&A section wherein you can post in your question. There is a poll happening wherein you can take part in the contest. That's all about it. Moving on. Yeah, so traditional programming versus machine learning. So traditional programming is very much rule-based, as you can see in this picture above. So in traditional programming, you give your inputs and the programmer programs based on the rules, and you get a set of outputs. And hence, the DevOps process is also similar. You just build and test, you deploy, and then you monitor. When it comes to machine learning is an iterative process wherein you give your input as data set, you code the ML model, you train it based on the data set, and then you get the output. Then comes a second iterations of the data set, let's say at an interval of one single day, or the interval can be varied based on business use cases. But yes, you'll have a second set of inputs wherein your model needs to be scalable as well as competent enough to take this new form of data and process it and give the output, predictive analytics. So as you can see, the process is iterative. So it goes on with data prep, then you train, deploy, and manage. And this process is continuously iterating. By Arthur Samuel, he says, machine learning is a field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. In a normal programming language, you have to program every output that you require. In machine learning, you train the models, and then at some point, it is capable of pattern recognitions of its own based on the feature sets that's given. Moving on, so a simple DevOps process when it comes to software engineering looks like this, wherein DevOps comprises of development and operations. Okay, so you have continuous integration, wherein in the development phase you plan, code, build, test, and in the monitoring and in the operation phase you go for release, deploy, operate, monitor, and hence you get a continuous feedback and the process continues. Now, ML systems in industry. Talking about a real life scenario, there's a hidden technical debt in machine learning systems, wherein data scientists or machine learning engineers most of the time go for infrastructure management than ML code. By that, I mean ML code can be written in a span of 1 week to a month, but then configuring the infrastructure for it requires time. So this diagram specifically represents the hidden technical debt of a machine learning system. This diagram is borrowed from the paper Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning System published in NeurIPS. And here it says only a small fraction of real-world ML system is composed of the ML code, as shown in this black box in the middle. The required surrounding infrastructure is vast and complex. Machine learning lifecycle. How does an industry lifecycle looks like? So CRISP-DM is a standardized ML framework wherein it lays down all the process or the components involved in the ML workflow. So it begins with business understanding, wherein the project objective or the business objectives are defined. In a typical business environment, these are done by product owners mostly. Then, based on the business understanding, data understanding is obtained and data is gathered. In case of large business, mostly they have their data, but when it comes to a startup scenario, then data collection is a hectic job because sometimes the required format of the data or the required amount of data is not available. Uh, so, and then moving on to that, once you have the data, you go for data preparation, wherein you focus on feature engineering. Once feature engineering is obtained or achieved, you go for modeling, wherein you predict potential customers using machine learning algorithms. This is just an example here, uh, but modeling phase is basically using your machine learning models wherein you perform the predictions based on the outcome that you would require. After modeling, the phase that comes is evaluation, wherein you perform every kinds of machine learning problem has a set of evaluation metrics. So you perform that, and if your evaluation is not satisfactory, you again either go back to the business understanding, understand it correctly, or simply again go back to data and pre-process it and understand it better. And if your evaluation is correct, then the next phase is deployment. So this was a industry standard framework used for ML lifecycle, which basically breaks down in a pipeline in this format, wherein you have the problem definition, you have the problem features, then you select the framework or the coding languages that you want to go with, then you go for a visualization. Here in visualization, it mostly means the exploratory data analysis visualizations, wherein you understand your data in a better way. Then you go for data processing, wherein you perform normalizations and standardizations, feature selections, then PCA if necessary. Then you go for data cleaning. You look for outliers or any missing value if there are any. Then you go for uh, apply learning, which is the model, apply the model that you've built. It can be either linear model, classification, clustering, or a semi-supervised problem set. And then you go for model maintenance, wherein you go for wherein you perform evaluation, monitoring, pre-training, diagnosis, etc. At a high level view, the workflow looks like this. So there are three phases. One is the build phase, second is train phase, and third is deploy phase. In the build phase, you deal with your data and you build your model. In the train phase, you train your built model with the data that you have. And once everything is fine, you also perform tuning if required and evaluation in the training phases. And then if everything goes well and is according to your need, or in a business scenario, if it's exactly according to the business needs, then you move on to the deployment phase. So the machine learning SDLC process looks like this, where in this phase, develop and test locally is basically the entire life cycle that we just spoke about in the previous slides. Okay, so that process takes somewhere around 1 week, or if in case of a highly complex problem, a month or two. That's pretty much about this phase. Rest of the process in the ML SDLC, or the so-called ML ops, involves packaging your code, wherein you have to resolve your dependencies, parameters, run scripts, builds, etc. Then you scale out, you perform load balancing, data partitioning, model distributions, auto ML if required. Right now, in present scenario, auto ML is still being evaluated, not massively used. Then you also have to tune. So if this is these are basically software paradigms of tuning, wherein you perform parallelism, GPU support, query tuning, caching, etc. So someone who comes from a software engineering background at this point would be pretty much familiar with these steps, wherein these steps are also involved in software engineering or software code. Then instrumentations wherein you perform monitoring, logging, versioning, security, etc. And then you automate the entire process. If all these are correctly performed, then only we go for automation. So this process takes takes more than months to perform, and this process is highly iterative. Uh, and then if everything is fine, then you see the model or the project on production. Moving ahead, talking about the challenges of ML deployment. So first challenge is heterogeneity, wherein you have multiple languages and frameworks present at current time. Python, R, Scala. You can also perform data science or ML with Java, Julia. Then there is framework combinations, multiple framework combinations like MXNet, PyTorch, TensorFlow, etc., etc. Then there are hardware dependencies wherein you need to choose between whether you need a GPU or not, and if someone has made or developed the algorithm machine learning model using GPU and trained it on so, then that requires substantial architectural investment, and that kind of investment should also uh, this kind of investment brings in the technical debt as well. Then you have new framework which is emerging every year. Then frames and languages, frameworks and languages evolve constantly, require ongoing maintenance and testing. Then the second challenge is composability, wherein composability basically address multiple teams, multiple languages, multiple frameworks, their interoperability, working together, etc., etc. Because your ML model may be fairly new, but if it has to be integrated within an existing system to give it intelligence, then an existing system is already written in some other languages, let's say C or C++, then you would also need to look on the interoperability, the API management, etc., etc. Moving to performance, well, success and performance are very context sensitive. Multiple by context sensitive, it means that in ML, the success parameters depends on basically how or what kind of output you want. Not it cannot be always predefined. It can change with time as well. Then there's no single success factor. There are multiple success factors contributing uh, the uh, to the achievement of the model in production. By that I mean, let's say you have a problem statement wherein you have performed modeling or training with three different sets of models, right? So let's say the first model gives you better accuracy, but the performance or scaling factor is very low. The second set gives you a lower accuracy, but the performance is highly accurate and as desired. So again, it boils down to the business decision, what the business requires. If they want to go for the low accuracy model and want to focus on performance or infrastructure scalability or performance optimizations, then yeah, it pretty much boils down to the business decision. Hence, there are multiple success factors. Then, of course, there is no one model right for every job. So every set of problems have can be achieved with different kinds of models, and hence, maintaining the performance of each of those is a challenge. Reusability, so team constantly is reinventing the wheel. So every time there's a new iteration depending on the requirement. So ML teams are at early stages know and also know the fact that it's a completely iterative process. So every day the requirement can change. Hence, constantly reinventing the wheel. Then proper version control lacking. So when it comes to ML, versioning has to be done not only for the ML model, versioning also has to be done for the ML pipeline code, versioning also has to be done for the data received. So there are tons of versioning to be done, and each versioning and also backward compatibility needs to be checked. So in such cases, reusability is definitely a challenge. Then you have multiple languages and frameworks not talking to each other. That becomes that raises the challenge of incompatibility, and hence reusability there becomes a major challenge. Then you have the iteration speed, wherein the ML deployment lifecycle is an evolving ecosystem. ML moves faster than traditional app dev, and also machine learning can introduce you to breaking changes to apps that consume model output. So basically, the reusability problems that we talked about in the previous slide. So there also, if something is not reusable, then again, you need to go back, iterate the code. You need to see in the compatibility between your app as well as the model, whether the app is consuming app or microservice, let's say. So in a ML scenario, the final output would be rendering the intelligence through something. It can be a microservice, it can be a container-based output, it can be an app-based output, right? So when it comes to that, you need to check if your app is actually consuming the output from the ML model or not. If not, again, the iteration needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly so that uh, the output remains without hindrance to the final business outcome, right? And then ML moves faster than traditional app dev. Definitely, traditional app dev is like, okay, you can plan a sprint and accordingly it goes. But ML, has been discussed a couple of minutes back as well. So ML involves a lot of things, and hence iteration needs to be faster because there are dependency issues as well. And as you've seen in the previous slides, ML deployment lifecycle is a continuous evolving ecosystem. Then the infrastructure management. So this raises the challenge because let's say on the left hand side of this slide, you have this is a training infrastructure, and this is your production infrastructure. So when an ML engineer trains a model on his or her machine, then they can afford to go for long compute cycle, fixed load, stateful, single user, and they are not aware of further dependencies that are present in a production ecosystem. Whereas in a production ecosystem, you have short compute bursts, the deployment process is quite elastic and stateless, and then you have multi-users interacting with each other, as you can see on the right-hand side of the diagram. Uh, uh, on the production, you have ETL systems, you have streaming systems, you have APIs interacting with each other. So every kind of dependencies needs to be taken care of, and hence infrastructure management is a challenge. Then some other kinds of challenge are modularity or portability. So the model, if at all, it is uh, it is trained on a single machine, and can it be ported to other machines? Can other developer rigs use it? That needs to be taken care of. Then extensibility and performance optimization. Yes, how scalable the model, how uh, yes, scalable, as well as how optimal the model is. That needs to be taken care of. If new sets of data come in, how much can the model be extended? That also needs to be seen. Then you have the scalability issues, wherein number one scalability issue is definitely the model scalability that we spoke about, and also the infrastructure scalability. So day in and day out, if the data size increases, is my system scalable enough to take that? That needs to be taken care of. Testability. So model testing, data testing, model pipeline testing, all these needs to be taken care of, and accordingly unit tests, integration tests needs to be designed, system monitoring needs to be performed, right? So on the right hand side you see a testing diagram which states I mean, which is has been taken from this paper, the ML test score, a rubric for ML production readiness and technical debt reduction. So this tells about what it is that involves in a ML-based system for testing and monitoring, and how is it different? How much is it different from the traditional testing and monitoring system? And then the final challenge is, of course, collaborative development. So you just don't have one single developer developing your ML system, right? You have multiple developers, and they need to collaborate with each other, understand each other, and accordingly perform the development. So that's again a challenge. So team management. Now comes the iterative incremental process in ML ops. So here you see this diagram has been borrowed from mlops.org, and here in it says what does an ML ops pipeline include. You see that it's different from DevOps. Here you have a design phase, then a model development phase, and then the operation phase. In the design phase, you have the requirements engineering, you perform the requirements engineering, you then perform the use case prioritizations, then you check for data availability. And then in the model development phase, you perform the data engineering required for your data preparedness for your ML modeling, then ML model engineering, then model testing and validation, right? And then in the operation phase, you have ML model deployment, CI/CD pipelines, monitoring, and triggering. So moving on here, so you have evaluate, model, explore, gather, define. This is just another flavor of the ML ops iterative process that was discussed in the previous slide. Then this phase is entirely DevOps. So you see an optimal ML ops experience as one where ML is one where machine learning assets are treated consistently with all other software assets within a CI/CD environment. Machine learning models can be deployed alongside the service that wraps them and the service that consumes them as a part of the unified release process. So this is one such consideration that needs to be taken care of. This consideration has been laid down by SIG MLOps and is very much prevalent to the MLOps process. Now, MLOps automation. So here you see the MLOps maturity model, wherein this phase is the DS deployment, and here is the MLOps operation. So these two phases are, one is the manual phase and other two are automated phases. So the MLOps process maturity is determined by the level of automation that can be performed on the data, the ML model, and the ML code pipeline. So here you see it starts with your data analysis, then you go for model analysis, these experiments, source repository, then CI/CD stage, then automated pipelines. You come for data engineering, ML model engineering, model registry, CD stage, which is ML model serving, right? Then ML prediction. Then you have the performance monitoring trigger. So a part of it can be automated and a part of it is manual. So again, to adopt MLOps, SIG MLOps suggests three levels of automation. First is definitely the manual process, which is a typical data science process, which is performed at the beginning of implementations of any ML problems. So this level has an experimental and iterative nature. Every step in each pipeline, such as data preparation and validation, model training and testing, are executed manually. Then the second phase is the ML pipeline automation, wherein this includes the execution of model training automatically. This is where the continuous training process is introduced for the model. And whenever a new data is available, the process of model retraining is triggered. This level of automation also includes data and model validation steps. Then comes the next phase, which is CI/CD pipeline automation. So this is the final stage wherein CI/CD system to perform fast and reliable model deployments in productions are automatized. The core difference from the previous step, which is the ML pipeline automation step, is that in the CI/CD automation step, we now automatically build, test, and deploy the data, the ML model, and the ML training pipeline components. Okay, so moving on. MLOps is a continuous process, as we have been discussing. So first of all, it involves continuous deployment and development, wherein it involves CI, CD, which are the common DevOps components, and then alongside with that, we have a CT, which is continuous training. So continuous integration basically extends the testing and validation of code and components by adding testing and validating data and models. Continuous delivery concerns with the delivery of an ML training pipeline that automatically deploys another ML model prediction service. And continuous training is unique to ML systems property, which automatically retrains the ML model for redevelopment, right? So ML model beyond the software engineering paradigm has one extra phase, which is the training. And the last phase that comes under the continuous monitoring phase is the, continuous maintenance phase is the continuous monitoring, wherein you need to monitor production data and model as well as performance metrics, which are closely bound to your business metrics. You need to continuously keep on monitoring that, because you add in new sets of data, you retrain the model with every addition of new sets of data or every addition of the model functionality. Therein, your performance metrics varies, and you need to keep a check whether your performance metrics is closely aligned with your business metrics. Then you have ML-based software delivery metrics. So there are 4 software delivery metrics which relates to DevOps as well as MLOps, but they are different in their own unique way. So this table basically states the 4 metrics, wherein you look at the deployment frequency, you look at the lead time for changes, you look at the mean time to restore, and change failure rate. So if you look at the DevOps section, DevOps includes a certain amount of parameters for deployment frequency, but when it comes to MLOps, a lot of other parameters needs to be taken care of, like model decay metric, new data availability, model retraining requirements, and the level of automation for the deployment process. All these needs to be checked. Then you have the lead time to change. So this basically states that how long does it take to go from code committed to code successfully running on production. So for the MLOps process, you need to see the durations of the explorative phase in data science in order to finalize the ML model for deployment or serving. So the data science lifecycle is the one that I showed you on the CRISP framework. You need to check the duration that is required to perform the entire data science lifecycle. And then you have the durations of the ML model training, which needs to be taken care of. And then you have the number and duration of manual steps, which are required for the deployment process. Then you have the mean time to restore, wherein in DevOps system, you have how long does it generally take to restore the service when a service incident or defect that impacts user occurs. So basically, when you have a ticket or an incident raised, how long would you need to restore your software in case of DevOps? In case of ML, it depends on the number and durations of manually performed model debugging and model deployment steps. In case where the ML model should be retrained, then mean time to restore also depends on the durations of model retraining, right? In case wherein a rollback needs to be performed to the previous version, then you would also need to check the data dependency and the model dependency as well together. Then change in the failure rate. So in case of DevOps, you check what percentage of changes to production or released to users results in degraded services. So based on the versioning part and also the business requirement part, you choose which module of the code to degrade or to keep. For ML, you need to choose the currently deployed model, the performance metrics, the previous model metrics, and also the kind of data that you are currently acquiring. Then putting all this together, everything that was discussed regarding MLOps. So in a nutshell, MLOps basically, MLOps basically consists of versioning of data ML model code, then testing. In case of testing, you also check the testing for data ML model code, and then automation. There are some features for data automation, for ML models, for code automation, and here reproducibility, deployment, monitoring, all these kinds of considerations needs to be done for ML ops. And every kind, all these specific consideration are exclusively for data, ML model, and code separately. To further reduce the technical debt of machine learning operations, go for documentations and also structure your project based on some standard project structures. That would reduce your team debt as well as the technical debt for your MLOps process. Moving on. So in a typical MLOps enterprise scenario, you perform experimentations on your development rig, and then you train at scale on the cloud, and then you move to production systems. Where each of this, whether you perform it on your training rig or on cloud or on the production system, each phases has certain steps, right? So Kubernetes, or the challenges discussed for ML ops are like heterogeneity, composability, scalability, then reusability. All these are managed, can be managed single-handedly by Kubernetes. So here you see these phases are typically, it can be tackled by Kubernetes for containerizing your hardware, runtime, as well as infrastructure. Then the ML process, which basically involves your workflow, then your ML frameworks, etc., can be taken care by Kubeflow. So Kubeflow, the Kubeflow ecosystem typically gives you these softwares wherein the pipelines are used for ML orchestration. Then you have experiments. Then you go for model serving, wherein these offers TensorFlow serving, PyTorch serving, Seldon serving. Then you have metadata, customized nuclear functions. For pairing, you have pairing is basically used for hybrid cloud. Then you have model training, wherein you perform distributed training notebooks and hyperparameter tuning. Catib basically performs hyperparameter tuning. A typical Kubeflow pipeline looks like this. It has an end-to-end orchestration, enabling and simplifying the orchestrations of machine learning pipeline. Then it has easy experimentation processes, wherein it makes easy for you to try numerous ideas and techniques and manage your various trials or experiments. And then you have easy reuse capability, wherein it enables you to reuse components and pipelines to quickly create end-to-end solutions without having to rebuild each time. Now, what does AWS provide us for MLOps enablement? So we have compute compute that is performed by AWS EC2. Then management, you can manage it using ECS or EKS. And then on top of that, you have Amazon SageMaker components or operators. Of late, back this June, Amazon SageMaker released the Amazon SageMaker component or operators for Kubeflow, which I'll cover in the next couple of slides. And above all, you have the container registry image as well. So Amazon EKS basically provides control plane and data plane that makes it easier for us to run Kubernetes on AWS without needing to install operate and maintain your own Kubernetes control planes on node. And basically, it is available on multiple availability zones, and EKS automatically detects and replaces unhealthy control planes. If there is any problem with any planes, it automatically takes care of it. And it is integrated with ECR, elastic load balancing, IAM for authentications, and VPC for isolation. Then you have EKS plus Kubeflow for machine learning. So you have EKS, and these offerings are provided by Kubeflow. So Kubeflow relies on Kubernetes to manage infrastructure. So you can either go ahead with Kubernetes and then Kubeflow on top of Kubernetes, or you can go ahead with EKS. On top of that, you can go for Kubeflow. SageMaker, as we all know, is a fully managed service for ML. It provides the following features: collection, building ML algorithms, setting, managing, training, debugging, manage training runs, deploy model in production, monitoring models, validate predictions, scale and manage the production environment. And here you see each of the offerings from under this SageMaker umbrella. Moving on, so scaling your ML on Kubernetes with SageMaker. So Kubernetes and Kubeflow gives you the following features like shared infrastructure, repeatable pipelines, automation, CI/CD. Both of these are open source. On top of that, Amazon SageMaker integration gives you a fully managed infra. Then you can also use ground truth for labeling your data set. Then you have automatic model tuning, then built-in optimized algorithms, then also spot training, managed spot training, then scalable inference endpoints and model monitoring as well. It's also, these are the features exclusively given by SageMaker and can also be integrated with Kubeflow and Kubernetes. So there are two ways of doing it. First is if you are already an existing Kubeflow and Kubernetes user, then all you need to do is use SageMaker components for Kubeflow pipelines. And if you do not use Kubeflow, but you are an existing Kubernetes user, then you go for SageMaker operators for Kubernetes. These Kubeflow pipeline components, each of these phases are components provided by the Kubeflow pipeline. I won't be covering this in depth. This was already covered. Just have a glance. So we have data preparation, model development and training at scale, and deployment, and as well as monitoring. Okay, then we have Amazon SageMaker components for Kubeflow pipelines. So this is the Kubeflow pipelines wherein you just use EKS for or ECS for container registry, and rest of the things are done by Kubernetes and Kubeflow. Here in this phase, some of the heavy lifting jobs for specific to ML are done by SageMaker components. So this SageMaker here has components such as training component, then model tuning, then inference components, as well as ground truth components, right? And this part can also be taken care of by SageMaker when you integrate SageMaker with the container registry phase. Now, talking about it, we have a small demo wherein you build a model using SageMaker instance. You use EKS, you use Kubeflow pipelines, and then you get the final output of the pipeline in your Kubeflow environment. So prerequisites of this basic demo is basically, first of all, you would need to have an IAM user role with all the necessary privileges. This is not mandatory. If you want to do it from your admin account, you can do it, but it's good to, if you are starting off or doing your first project, then it's good to have a separate IAM roles, right? And then you go for EC2 instance, which basically acts as the gateway instance to the EKS clusters. Of course, VPC and security groups needs to be attached to it. Then on-site EC2, you perform CLI configuration. Then you install EKS Scuttle. Also alongside EKS Scuttle, you install kubectl and also IAM Authenticator. All these are done inside EC2 instances. And then inside that, you create the EKS cluster. So this is one such way. You can also use, I mean, there are two modes. One is Fargate mode and the other one is Linux mode. So this was done using Linux mode. And then, of course, once the EKS clusters are created, you would need to attach the IAM role. And this particular set of commands, once your EKS cluster is created, all you need to do is install Kubeflow. This particular set of commands does install Kubeflow. And then after that, you need to install the Amazon SageMaker components. The component and the IAM role are basically, you can read out the component and the IAM role from this document. Then the code, wherein first is you build your code, then you create a Kubeflow pipeline, right? And then once you build the code and you create the custom Kubeflow pipeline, then Kubeflow gives you certain components. So the first component is basically Amazon SageMaker hyperparameter tuning job. The second component is basically to update the number of epochs here. The third component is Amazon SageMaker training jobs. The fourth component here is Amazon SageMaker model creation. And the fifth component is Amazon SageMaker model deployment. Once you are done with the model deployment, you basically compile and run your pipeline. Once you compile and run your pipeline, you see the pipeline in the Kubeflow installations that you have done. So it looks like this, which is here it states the hyperparameter tuning job, the custom function to update your epoch, the training job, the create model, the deploy inference endpoint, and this basically gives your ML orchestration pipeline. So this was a very quick demo. I would suggest you go back and replicate the demo, read up the documents, and if you have any questions, you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. That's all about my presentation. Thank you.